Welcome to another edition of Courtside with Rob and Washut. But before we head over to the arena, I want to give a big thank you to our sponsors of the show, Group Therapy Bike Tours and Slim Chickens. We'll start with Group Therapy. They are all in on the Nebraska basketball wave. Head over to grouptherapybiketours.com and book your ride today for all of your pregame, post-game, whenever game, birthday party, wedding, family reunion, corporate event. They have a 15-person trolley ride, a 6-person mini bike for whatever event you want to celebrate. And like I said, it is full force in Nebraska. If you've gone to a Nebraska game, I'm sure you've seen the trolleys riding around the Haymarket and downtown Lincoln. If you go over to grouptherapybiketours.com and use the promo code NebraskaBall, you will save 15% on your first ride. So make sure you head on over there and support our great sponsor. It's a ton of fun. I've been on it several times. Could not recommend it enough. Now over to our other sponsors, Slim Chickens. Bill Hooks and his wife Stacy are diehard Nebraska fans, and they couldn't wait to jump on the Nebraska basketball train. Locally owned Slim Chickens has 2 locations, 84th and Old Cheney and 16th and Pine Lake. Slim Chickens features a variety of options with fried and grilled chicken tenders, wings, salads, wraps, sandwiches, chicken and waffles, and southern sides. What makes Slim's different? Well, they have over 17 different dipping sauces for guests to choose their favorite. Slim Chickens is available for dine-in, drive-thru, or delivery via their online ordering. Check out Slim Chickens app and start earning rewards today. Slim Chickens is always a favorite for large gatherings and tailgate parties, especially Nebraska basketball tailgate parties, and let them do the cooking for you. Slim Chickens is moving forward, and they are expanding to the north side of Lincoln soon, so keep an eye out for that. Stop into your local Slim Chickens restaurant today for some southern hospitality and see their newly remodeled locations. Again, thanks to all our sponsors. Now let's head over to the arena and take you courtside with me, Rob and Washut. Welcome to another edition of Courtside with Rob and Washut here at Pinnacle Bank Arena following Nebraska's 87-64 domination of Penn State in a game they were expected to win big, and did just that. And this was a game, obviously you can make the coin the phrase, get right opportunity, and it certainly was. But for that to happen, Nebraska needed to get back to doing the things that made it so successful, especially through the first 20 games, that it wasn't doing during that stretch of losing 4 of its last 6. And first and foremost, it came to just getting the offense back on track and not just making shots, scoring points, but getting back to the flow on and off the ball and the rhythm and the shot making that made it one of the most efficient and effective offenses in the country before this kind of February skid. And lo and behold, it's amazing what happens when teams aren't allowed to bump, grab, hold, tackle, do whatever to Nebraska on and off the ball, the way Illinois did, the way Purdue did, the way Iowa did, the way even Northwestern did for the first half of that game. The officials, you give them credit. They had their issues like they always do, but they kind of nipped that in the bud right out of the gate. I remember there was a sequence, 2 straight possessions. Bryce Sanford drew a whistle because of off-ball contact. And I think that kind of set the tone that the refs weren't going to allow this Iowa-style defense where you just wrestle Nebraska to the ground on every possession and totally take their offense out of rhythm. They got that under control, and Nebraska pounced on them, where suddenly Price was able to move freely, come off screens, get open looks. Boom, he hits his first 5 3-pointers and has a career day, 33 points, ties Kerry Cohorn's single-game program record with 8 made 3-pointers. But it wasn't just him. Really, I think the entire flow of the offense just looked so much better. And again, you chalk it up a little bit to the level of competition. Penn State is not Illinois. They're not Purdue. They're not even Iowa. So this, again, was a game that Nebraska did what it's supposed to do. But the fact that it did what it was supposed to do, it looked really good in the process, is certainly encouraging. Just given how frustrating the offensive struggles had been over the last 6 games, or at least 4 of the last 6. This was a game where Nebraska needed to, just see the ball go through and get some of that swagger back offensively. And with 22 assists, they had 11 turnovers. 3 of those were from I guess 2 of those are from Jared Garcia, 3 from Garcia, 2 from Leo Curtis, and we'll get to those guys in a little bit. But you're talking about kind of end of your rotation guy having 5 of your 11 turnovers. That's pretty good. Sam Hoiberg, he had 10 assists, career high 10 assists, his first career double-double, 11 points, 10 assists, 4-7 shooting, 5 rebounds, did it all like always. And Braden Frager got his first start in place of Berke Björktuchel, and we'll get to him also later on here. But Frager stepped in, and when to talk about just the confidence and the swagger element, Braden only scored. I mean, he had 15 points. A lot of those came late when the game was fairly in hand. But his impact right out of the gate on the offensive glass, he had 3 offensive rebounds in the first 3 minutes of play. And for a team that needed to just kind of get after Penn State and set that tone right out of the gate, Braden Frager was as critical as anybody. Along with Price hitting those threes, Braden's effort and kind of getting back to that attack mode that we've been waiting to see for so long, that had just as much to do as getting the Huskers rolling as anything. So you just go down the line. Pretty much everyone that stepped on the court had a positive impact in the game. I guess we'll talk about why Braden started. Berke Björktuchel was a late scratch where he didn't practice Thursday, he came back Friday, and then felt good, and it was part of the film and the practice, and it didn't look like anything was wrong. And then he went through the film session and shoot around on Saturday morning, but then right about an hour before tip, according to Fred Hoiberg, he came down with the same kind of stomach illness that Rink Mast had right before Michigan, to where he couldn't even get out of the bathroom. I mean, he was throwing up constantly. Really just couldn't keep anything down, not even water. And so, he wasn't listed on the pregame availability report because he was that far along into the process before Nebraska knew that he wasn't going to be able to play. And so they kind of had to adjust on the fly and turn to Braden Frager, who, was still coming back from his own injury. That Washington sprained ankle that he had, he was still not 100% for quite a while after his return following the Michigan game. And I thought today, not only his aggression on the offensive glass, you just saw a little bit more of that burst to him where he was getting to the rim. He took, he's 5 of 10 from the field. 8 of those 10 shots were threes, but he got to the line for a couple free throws. He had 6 rebounds, drew 2 fouls, had a steal, and was plus 22 over his 23 minutes. You'll take that every day, especially for a player that was in a situation where he needed to step up and step up big to fill all the things that Berke brings in that regard in terms of, just defensive presence and rebounding. So we'll see kind of where Berke is going forward. Looking ahead, they play Maryland on Wednesday night. You would hope that he'll have time to just flush out whatever he's dealing with. But, that's kind of something you got to keep an eye on. This is a Nebraska team that was already really thin, working with about a 7-man rotation. And now one of your primary starters is dealing with an illness. And, it took Rink some time to kind of get over what he was dealing with. And if this is similar, which Fred Hoiberg said it kind of seemed pretty close to the same deal, that could be a deal where Berke might be recovering for a few days here, maybe even on through the Maryland game. So definitely something to keep an eye on. And then the other kind of sour note to an otherwise good vibe day was Jamarcus Lawrence with about 6 minutes left in the game. It looked like he was just kind of stumbling, coming out of a tangle up, bringing the ball up the floor, and he stepped wrong. And I couldn't tell initially if he rolled his ankle, if he tweaked his knee, but after the game, Fred Hoiberg said that it was an ankle injury. And the good news is that Hoiberg just described it as a tweak and that the swelling wasn't that bad. But with ankles, as we know, Nebraska's had a lot of them over the years. That next day is kind of when you get a real gauge of the severity. We'll see what happens with the swelling. We'll see just kind of how his ankle responds when the adrenaline from the game is gone, and the injury can kind of set its course a little bit. So that's another kind of primary concern right now because again, Nebraska needs all the depth they can get, and Jamarcus Lawrence has been a fixture in this lineup all season long. and they don't have a lot more backcourt options that they can turn to at this point. Kale's already playing a lot of minutes. Sam's playing a bunch of minutes. I mean, maybe you turn more to Kendall Blue if Jamarcus Lawrence is out, but hopefully he responds well and is able to get back onto the court for Maryland. But, that's up in the air right now. We'll know more over the next few days. In the meantime, without Berke, without Jamarcus for, the final few minutes, and then with Braden, he only played 10 minutes in the first half. And so you're talking about at least two, with Frager and Berke. Berke being out and Frager, he picked up 2 early fouls and only played 10 minutes. That left Nebraska having to go pretty deep into its bench, certainly deeper than it's gone in quite some time. And Jared Garcia saw the court early and often. Leo Curtis saw the court early and often. And both played some of their most extensive and productive roles of the season to date. Jared Garcia played almost 19 minutes, 18:43 to be exact. He only took 2 shots, made one of them, but his impact, took 2 shots, and he got to the free throw line, made a couple free throws, but his impact was on the boards. 7 rebounds, 3 offensive rebounds. And then, he drew 2 fouls. He had 3 block shots. He had a steal. That is exactly what Nebraska needs from Jared Garcia. Like, you're never going to expect him to go off for, 20 points, just because I don't know what his role is on this particular team. What his role is exactly what he did today against Penn State, where he just, that physicality element, especially with Berke out, him stepping up on the glass the way that he did was so critical to Nebraska, just kind of being the enforcer from the get-go. And then you add in Leo Curtis's contributions. He played 10 minutes. That was the second most minutes he's played in a game this season, behind only the Michigan game when Nebraska was down Braden and Rink Mast. He played 10 minutes. And again, he didn't really light up the stat line. He only took 2 shots, made 1 for 2 points, had an assist, a couple turnovers. So, I mean, like, you look at the box scores, like, oh, he didn't do really much of anything. But just having that extra body in the post, and then having that 7'2" presence defensively, where he was able to protect the rim, he was able to seal off drives and just do the things that Berke does defensively so well, just to have another body in there. With Rink, he was okay, 8 points, 6 rebounds, only 4 of 10 shooting, but just to have another option there where, you're not just getting kind of emergency minutes, but you're getting, productive minutes out of Jared, out of Leo. That is a big reason why this game was in control the way that it was for Nebraska from start to finish. So shout out to the bench for stepping up really as much as it had in quite some time. And with Berke and Jamarcus, their status kind of being unknown right now, that's certainly a reassuring sign that those 2 guys were ready to, ready to handle that moment when their name was called upon. So Nebraska takes care of business. They improved to 23-4 overall, 12-4 in the Big Ten. And you look around what's going on in college basketball, Kansas getting housed at home, and Houston losing. Like, this is a situation where Nebraska just needs to keep doing what it's supposed to do. You're going to face Maryland in a game that's going to be a lot like today, where you're going to be expected to win. Maryland's struggled all season. You're at home. This is a game Nebraska should win and should do so relatively convincingly. And then you start winning, back-to-back, comfortable games. You get a little bit of that mojo back right in time for your West Coast swing to UCLA and USC. USC just lost to Oregon today. And so I think Nebraska's in a good spot right now. Now, there's some questions, with injuries and availability and whatnot that they need to figure out. But this was exactly what they needed. Coming off that really frustrating stretch where it just seemed like they couldn't do much of anything right, to just have a game like this where the lid comes off, the offense finds its flow again, Price goes off, and has a career day. Your guys that hadn't really been seeing the floor at all step up with important contributions. Like, this is exactly what Nebraska needed. It was the right thing at the right time, and hopefully they can use it as a springboard to finish these final 4 remaining games as well as they did today. So sign off for now. Tune in on Wednesday night for pre- and post-game analysis before Nebraska's home game with Maryland. Thanks again to our sponsors, Group Therapy Bike Tours, Slim Chickens, and we'll see you on Wednesday night.